Ahoy! New World Update 3.02 was just announced, and this comes with some news that we already knew about, but also some other interesting changes, one of them I particularly like for tanking as well. First of all, if you are using alt characters, you can now flag PvP with multiple of them. This was previously not possible, you were limited to one character and then locked for 3 days. This has something to do with the whole influence push and everything, and they have other methods to deal with that now, so they think that's no longer necessary. The same mutations will no longer cycle together, which is fantastic because that means we can maybe not get Lazarus Genesis weeks all that often, and we can actually get interesting expeditions at the same time. So I'm looking forward to that one. There are a couple of bug fixes here, but then they also have a better mount race experience once again, with various mount races being shortened that you can see here. Those were extremely long, sometimes like 20 minutes-ish, so I'm glad that they're cutting that down. The enemy count in Starstone barrels is also fixed. They're also improving the bandwidth allocation for characters in large groups, which should hopefully once again result in performance improvements. That brings us to artifact changes, where I said I liked one of the changes in this patch particularly much, which is the Lost Stopwatch artifact. This now provides additional threat generation similar to normal taunt gems. Previously that made it basically near useless when it comes to tanking because the threat generation is an important part of the taunt itself. And now this means you can tank with items that cannot get Carnelians. And you can also tank with weapons that can get Carnelians, but you just want to deal 1 damage with, because you can put other gems in there instead, even though trade-offs with Lost Stopwatch itself is you lose some damage too, so that may or may not be worth it, but in particular for Spark, this is fantastic, because Spark is a great tank offhand in my opinion, but you couldn't use it previously because you can't put a Carnelian in it, because you can't put a gem slot in it. The unfortunate news for this is, of course, if you haven't farmed Lost Stopwatch like me, then you'll have to wait until it comes back around, because right now it cannot be farmed. The issue with artifacts not dropping again for people that disconnected, when they dropped while they disconnected, should also be fixed now, and you should be able to get the artifact again. Tuned leather pants keep having problems, and now they're trying to once again make it actually provide the stats it's supposed to provide, 10 to all stats, and the tooltip was glitching as well apparently. We have very significant changes to Heartrunes. The damage of Dark Ascent is increased by 20%, the damage of Firestorm is increased by 33%, though keep in mind this is damage over time, and the Devour Heartrune damage is increased by 26%. I'm not going to do the calculations in depth here, I will do that in the future, but what I can say at this point is this is definitely very interesting. We have Detonate kind of taking a little bit more of a backseat than before in some situations, because it is just a much higher risk to run with the massive self-rend that you get now. And with other Heartrunes now competing more in damage as well, I think there are some very interesting potential use cases that could pop up here. I will definitely look into this further and try around with this. I have been testing a lot of Heartrunes lately, especially in Arena, and I think there's a lot of undervalued Heartrunes really that might be even more interesting with these changes. So I'm very, very happy with that, and I hope they continue pushing these different Heartrunes. We're only having one major nerf here, which is to the Blunderbuss, and that decreases the base damage value in PvP from 9 to 12%. This may not sound like much, this 3% reduction, but base damage is a pretty major factor because it affects all of your damage output. So this should be something that they will feel, or Blunderbuss users in general will feel to some degree, and anyone hit by them too. Obviously, probably not immediately noticeable when you're getting bursted, but this should overall probably level the performance a little bit. Ice Gauntlet gets a fix to a very specific bug that caused players to turn into walking icicles. Looked extremely hilarious, but was a bit confusing, so that one's fixed. The Rapier gets a massive, very important fix that was drastically affecting the DPS, especially in situations where you can fully spam Flurry like Sandworm, being that fleeting strikes did not properly function. That's an upgrade on Flurry that reduces the cooldown of Flurry with each hit of Flurry, according to the tooltip, by 7%. This is actually supposed to be 5% based on a previous balance change, but still, that's a 20% reduction, sorry, a 25% reduction on Flurry immediately, and obviously not having that cuts into DPS. As far as I'm aware, To the Bone is also not functioning properly at the moment. That may be fixed in the same breath. It's not mentioned here though, or maybe it is already working properly again. I haven't looked into that, but either way, this should be a very, very big positive change. Physical and elemental aversion are both buffed from 4.2% to 4.5%, giving them a bit more value. I think this is especially nice for elemental aversion, which in my opinion is already a fairly good perk. Physical aversion I think is just not that high value overall in comparison, but elemental aversion right here, that's great. I think that is very, very helpful. And yeah, I don't really necessarily think that it needed a buff, but also I'm not complaining. And then damage type conditioning had its power increased from 4% to 5%, which honestly next to the elemental aversion effect still looks very lackluster. If I could have one specific type of conditioning where I need to take damage first from that specific type and then I get 0.5% more mitigation than elemental aversion, I'm not that sold. I know there are some outlier cases where you would benefit from conditioning but not from elemental aversion. Say for example a Great Axe Abyss is one of those cases where you could have void conditioning, whereas elemental aversion wouldn't work against the basic attacks, but kind of niche. And again, the benefit here, considering you have to take damage from them first, not that high in comparison, I would argue, with how specific this has to be. So I'd still favor something like elemental aversion, but you can also have both at the same time, so there's that. Slowing Tether, the weapon perk for Baleful Tether, still has it slow, but the Disintegrate on it no longer ticks every second or gets afflicted every second, but rather it flies a single stack of Disintegrate on use. Healthy Toast gets a massive nerf. It is changed from 11% of your maximum health to 15% of your base health, which means if you have anything higher than base health, this will generally lose value, or anything significantly higher. This means that it keeps value mostly for mages with very, very low con, or players with very low con. So maybe they're intending it to be for that, but rather I think this is primarily just another hit at the Shirking combo with Ankh, because Healthy Toast is affected by Ankh, which they could have just separated from that, I guess, but either way, I don't think Healthy Toast with base health is going to be that useful for most players. The Tumbler Feetwraps get a 1 second cooldown to the Shirking Blessing perk, which mainly means this is for the self-heal, which is still significantly shorter than Shirking Heals with its 5 seconds cooldown, so it's still going to be pretty good. This mainly prevents these from proccing too many times in a row from multiple abilities, attacks, hitting at once from Blunderbuss and all that stuff, so you get that massive overheal. And speaking of Shirking Heals, fix an issue that caused the Shirking Heals health percentage to scale with gear score. We knew this was coming. This now caps at 1.5% of your max health at 700 gear score, and will probably show the scaled value in the tooltip. I do not believe that this will make Shirking Heals useless. I think that even based on the calculations we had previously, it's very likely that Shirking Heals will retain at least some of its value. I will calculate that more in the future, and we can compare it to the new elemental aversion as well. But obviously I do believe that this will somewhat decrease the value compared to currently, where the heal's just absolutely broken and insane. No further changes to Ankh and so on so far, so we'll see how it plays out after this, and I reckon that depending on how things go, they might do more changes in the next major patch. That's kind of how they've been talking about this so far. They just want to see the impact of this first. We get a bunch of fixes. I'm just going to show you a quick overview of these here. This one's very interesting though. Some mutated accessories cannot be updated, but instead drop as fixed versions. The previous perks, like Focused or Refreshing Ward, will now drop as valid perks at that gear score. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Does that mean we can get Refreshing Ward as 700 gear score and it's a valid perk? Because I thought they're kind of trying to move away from that, and not really understanding what they're trying to express here. If anyone knows better, then please let me know. But yeah. I hope they're not kind of trying to like carry these old perks over in any way, and I hope this is just referring to old 625 items or something. This is also directly tied to the next one, which says fix an issue that caused outdated gear and perks to drop for players, which would make me think that they don't want the stuff to drop anymore. Expansion crafting aptitude chests now have the ability to drop timeless shards. Not quite sure why they're doing that. I think timeless shard supply is pretty good at the moment already. Most of them are pretty low value. I guess I just want to have crafters to be able to be more self-sufficient and not have to run expeditions or something like that. There's also a couple of other crafting fixes here that I'm not going to discuss individually, but some aptitude stuff, especially with different rewards. Named items from Savage Divide will now have perk rerolls, which is very nice, very interesting. since that wasn't possible previously. They seem to just be completely locked. There's a few interesting ones in here, for example a Madhouse, which is a fire staff that comes with Empowering Fireball and Keen locked. And then, again, a couple minor fixes, for example reducing the crafting coin cost on material conversion recipes to the minimum possible value. We have various season quest fixes, and the price of Marks of Fortune has been adjusted according to whatever the currency exchange rate in different countries are. Usually this can hurt, usually this means more expensive and not cheaper for most places. We'll see what it means in this case. I will of course do new tests for things like Shirking Heals, so if you're interested in that, consider subscribing and clicking the bell. Tomorrow we'll be talking about the 2 new artifacts that can be farmed this week as well, being the Wall, the Tower Shield, as well as the Void Darkblade. Again, if you're interested in that, subscribe button is right there. And if you'd like to support me further, then you can do so on Patreon and get early trading tips and general tips in return. Thanks to all of my patrons who already do exactly that. And thank you for watching. Duke Sloth, out.